Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. I never believed in ghosts, God, or demons until last night. I've always been a skeptic. No religion, no afterlife, no ghosts, just the physical world and the stories people tell make sense of it. I used to roll my eyes at haunted house stories. I'd laugh when people talked about angels or demonic possession. It was all nonsense to me, until last night. Now I'm sitting in a gas station parking lot, shivering violently despite the humid air, staring at my hands like they're not mine anymore. The skin feels too tight, the bones too brittle. Something followed me home last night. I don't think it came from this world, and I don't think I'm going to survive tonight. Let me explain. I live alone in a small rural house just outside of town. No roommates, no nearby neighbors. Just trees and silence. A silence that used to be comforting, but now feels like a hell breath. Yesterday, I got home around 8 p.m. I'd been out running errands and was dead tired. It had just started to rain. A cold, misty drizzle. Enough to make the woods look hazy, like a living shadow through the headlights. As I pulled into the driveway, my car headlights hit something standing at the edge of the tree line. I thought it was a deer at first. Two pale, round shapes reflecting the light. But deer don't stand upright. I froze, my foot hovering over the brake pedal. The figure didn't move, didn't react, just watched. It was impossibly tall, unnaturally thin, and even from 30 feet away, I could tell something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. The shape of its head wasn't right. Too long, like a stretched skull, and its arms hung too low, the fingertips dragging the wet ground. I blinked, and it was gone, like literally gone. No sound of running, no movement of leaves, no shadow of a thing disappearing into the trees. Just vanished. 1 second it was there, the next it wasn't. I sat in my car for a long time, the engine ticking, the headlights slicing through the rain. I told myself I was just tired, a trick of the light, a hallucination. That's what I told myself, until I saw the footprints, leading from the woods up my driveway to my front door. Bare footprints, long toes, deep in the mud, as if something heavy had walked through barefoot, slowly. They stopped at my welcome mat, and there were no prints going back. I stood on my porch, staring at the door. I don't know why, but I knocked before opening it. A pathetic, hollow sound. I laughed at myself. What the hell are you doing? But when I stepped inside, every light in the house was on. Not just on, they were a blinding, harsh white. Every bulb, every lamp. The sudden brightness felt like a physical violation. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt amplified, like the world had been turned up to 11. The wind groaning through the trees, the ticking clock, the creak of the old floorboards. But worst of all, the house itself seemed to be breathing. A low, constant hum, like a distant whisper. Around 2:30 a.m., the hallway light turned off by itself. Just clicked off. The house went from a false brightness to a consuming, absolute darkness. I got up to check the switch. It was still flipped on. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Slow, wet breathing. A rasping, gurgling sound coming from my bedroom closet. It was too loud to be human. It sounded like something trying to breathe through a throat full of water and gravel. I froze. My body knew before my brain did. Something was in there with me. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and yanked the closet door open. Nothing. No one. Just my old coats, some boxes, and silence, so profound it felt like a weight on my chest. I didn't sleep. This morning, I noticed something carved into my bedroom wall. It hadn't been there yesterday. I swear on my life. It looked like 3 long symbols, like crosses, but twisted and elongated, the lines jagged and raw. They were burned into the drywall, deep as if gouged with something hot. The smell of scorched plaster still hung in the air, and then my nose started bleeding. Just out of nowhere, a sudden gush of warm liquid. It hasn't stopped for more than an hour. Every time I wipe it, it starts again. I've gone through half a roll of paper towels. The blood feels thick, almost oily. I came out to the gas station for a break, just to get away. But even now, in a lit parking lot, surrounded by people, I don't feel alone. I can feel it watching me. But it's more than that. Something is inside me. Not metaphorically, I mean literally. I feel like there's something under my skin, like it's a parasite, moving and twisting just below the surface. I can feel a cold pressure behind my eyes and a strange, deep ache in my bones. It's wearing me, like a coat that hasn't zipped up yet, and I'm just aligning. And here's the thing that broke me. The reason I wrote this, while I was in the bathroom here at the station, I looked in the mirror and my reflection didn't move. I turned my head to the right. It stayed still. I raised my hand. It stayed perfectly still, hanging at its side. Then, after a long, terrifying second, its mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural smile. A smile that didn't reach its eyes, which were black, just for an instant. I didn't smile. It smiled at me like it knew a terrible secret. Then it mouthed two words, its lips forming the shape slowly, deliberately. He's coming. I never believed in ghosts, or God, or demons. But I believe now, because I think I brought one home with me, and it doesn't want to leave. If anyone's ever seen something like this before, please tell me what to do. My nose is still bleeding. The blood smells like rust and burning paper. I think I'm running out of time. Story 2. I escaped a secret society. I wish I hadn't. That night felt just like every other night in Downey Hall. Looking back now, the world should have warned me. The moon should have shined brighter. The wind should have whispered louder. The lights in the hallway should have gone out. They didn't. It was another night alone. I think that simple lonely was what brought him. I almost didn't get up when he knocked on the door. It hadn't done me any good so far. The first time I opened it, it was my roommate. We were politely in a tent of the first 2 weeks, but then he disappeared. He never even told me where he was going. I just came back to our room after theater appreciation one morning, and he was gone. Over the next 3 months, more people knocked on the door. The president of the Baptist Student Union, with her plastic bag of cookies and plastic smile. The scouts for fraternities who all smelled the same. Cheap cologne and cheaper beer. I wanted friends, sure, but I wasn't desperate. High school taught me how to be alone. I only got up from my bed because I was bored. There are only so many video essays to watch. I threw off my sheet and felt a cold tile. Moonlight snuck into the blackout curtains as I walked past my third-story window. Other people had gone out for the night, like they did every Thursday. I went out the first week before a panic attack. It made me come back to the dorm. The next day, my roommate and his friends asked if I was okay. That's when I started hoping he'd move out. The man who stood at the door was someone I had never seen. He wore a black t-shirt and baggy jeans. His clothes weren't helped by his messy blonde hair down to his shoulders or his stubble that almost vanished in the harsh fluorescent light. But it was all somehow perfect. Like every hair was meant to be out of place. He was what I had hoped to become. Confident, handsome, adult. He put out his hand to me, and I noticed a simple gold ring with a strange engraving. It was a circle bound in a waving line. My eyes locked on it like it held a secret. Emmett. Yeah. My hand shook as I held it out to him. My body was trying to warn me when the world failed. I told myself it was just what the school counselor called social anxiety. Piper, his hand was warm. It felt like an invitation. Can I come in? Please. I winced as the word came out of my mouth. I wasn't desperate. Piper walked in like he had been in hundreds of rooms like mine. I hope I won't be long, he said as he pulled one of the antique desk chairs out. I sat across from him. Neither of the chairs had been used since my roommate left. I mostly stayed in bed. He watched me silently while my nerves started to spark. His eyes were expectant, the eyes of a county fair judge examining a hog. "So what can I do for you?" I asked to break the silence. "The question, Emmett, is what we can do for you." It felt wrong. The words were worn thin. "We, Moon and Vine." He took off the gold ring and handed it to me. It wasn't costume jewelry. I turned it between my fingers. The circle I had seen was a half moon. An etched half formed a crescent, while a smooth half completed the sky. It was ensnared in a vine. Kazoo, maybe. What now? You haven't heard of it. At least you shouldn't have. His sly smile held a dark secret. Have you heard of secret societies? Like at Ivy League schools? Sure. It wasn't a lie exactly. I had read something about them during one of my nights on Wikipedia. Is that what this is about? In a way, Moon and Vine is the county's oldest secret society. It's also the only secret society left in the state, since the folks in the Capitol cleaned house a few decades ago. Our small stature let us stay in the shadows when the auditors came. His voice echoed memory, but he shouldn't have known all of that. He couldn't have been more than 25. He went quiet and continued to examine me. So, not to be rude, but why are you telling me all of this? We've been watching you, Emmett. That's all I can say for now. If you want to learn more, you'll have to come with me. He took his ring and placed it back on his finger. What do you say? That was when I realized what was happening. This was a scene from the stories I read as a kid, the ones that got me through high school. This was when the person who's been abused, abandoned, alone finds their place in something better than the world around them. Memories of badly shot public service announcements flicked in my mind. Stranger danger. But Piper couldn't be a stranger. He was a savior. He was choosing me. Even if the warning clamoring through my stomach was right, I didn't have anything to lose. Yeah, show me more. I was claiming my destiny. Piper led me down the switchback steps and through the lobby. When he opened the front door, the autumn wind shuffled across the bulletin board. The latest missing poster flew up. It was for someone named Drew P., whose gold-rimmed glasses and rough academic beard made him look like he was laughing at a joke you couldn't understand. He was a senior who went missing in the spring, the latest in the school's annual tradition. The sheriff's department had given up trying to stop it years ago. They decided it was normal for students to run away. Downey Hall sat right by the highway, the town's main road. You could usually hear the souped-up pickup trucks of the local high school students roaring down it. When Piper walked me to the shoulder, there were no sounds. It must have been late. I reached for my phone to check the time and realized I had left it upstairs. "Ready?" Piper asked. The breeze took some of his voice. Before I could answer, he started across the road. I had never jaywalked before, certainly not across a highway, but I followed him. He was jogging straight into the thick line of oak trees that faced Downey Hall. By the time I reached the opposite shoulder, Piper was gone. I could hear him rustling through the brush. I looked down the highway to make sure no one would see me. Then I walked in. It wasn't more than a minute before I was through the thicket. The first thing I noticed was the moonlight above me. It was dark in the thicket, but I was standing in a circular clearing where the moon didn't have to fight the foliage. In the middle of the clearing was what must have been a house in the past, with its mirroring spires on either end and breaking blackboards all around. It would have been more at home in 1900s New England than 2020's flyover country. It looked as fragile as a twig tent, but it felt significant. Decades, maybe centuries ago, it had been a place where important people did important things. I told myself to rein in my excitement. Coming! Piper's voice beckoned me from the dark inside the house. I didn't want to leave him waiting. Right behind you. I heard a shake in my voice as I hurried to the doorframe, whose door had rotted away within it. The only light in the mansion was the moonlight. It wasn't coming from the windows. There weren't any. Instead, it was seeping through the larger cracks in the facade. I almost stepped on the shattered glass from the fallen chandelier as I walked into what had been a grand hall. I smelled the dust and cobwebs on the bent brass. A more metallic smell came through the dirt spots scattered around the floor. A line of figures surrounded the room. I couldn't see any of their faces in the dark, but they were wearing long black robes. They were watching me. I began to walk toward the one closest to me when I heard Piper summon me again. "It's downstairs. Hurry up already." He was losing his patience with me. My mother had always warned me that I have that effect on people, but I had hoped it wouldn't happen so soon. I searched the dark for a stairwell. Walking forward into the shadows, I found where I was supposed to go. There were 2 sets of spiral stairs going down into a basement and up as high as the spires I had seen outside. Spiders had made their homes between their railings, and rats had taken shelter in their center columns. Between the 2 pillars was a solitary section of wall. It looked sturdier than the rest of the house. It towered like it had been the only part of the house made of a firmer substance, brick or concrete. It was also the only part of the house that wasn't turned by age. At the foot of the column was an empty fireplace. Whoever had been keeping up the column didn't bother with it. The column was for the portrait. It was in the colonial style of the founding father's portrait, but I didn't recognize the man. In the daylight, I might have laughed at his lumbering frame. It looked like his fat stomach might make him tumble over his rail-thin, stocking legs in any direction at any moment. His arrow of a nose and pinprick glasses almost sunk into his marshmallow of a face. Before that night, I would have snickered if I had seen him in a history textbook. In the moonlight, I knew he was worthy of reverence. The glinting gold plate under his tiny feet read, "Master Volp." I wanted to stare at Master Volp until the sun rose, but I couldn't leave Piper waiting. I had to earn my place. I ran down the spiral staircase on the left of the shrine and found myself in another vast chamber. I felt the loose dirt under my feet and noticed that the metallic smell was stronger. The room was lined with more robed shadows. Like the figures upstairs, they were stone still, waiting for me. I could just make out their faces in the light of the candles along the opposite wall. They were all young guys like me. In the middle of the candles, I saw Piper. About time. The charm of his voice was breaking under the strain of impatience. "Sorry, sir. I got distracted upstairs." I winced at myself for saying sir. Now, Piper would have to be polite and correct me. He didn't. "There's quite a lot to see, isn't there? I'll forgive you this time." His laugh echoed off the walls. I saw they were made of concrete. I tried to match his laugh, but it sounded forced. I hoped he wouldn't notice. Walking toward his face in the dark, I tripped over a mound in the dirt. I had expected the ground to be flat, without any splintered wood flooring, but the mound must have been at least 6 inches tall and 6 feet long. As I made my way more carefully, I realized there were mounds all over the ground in a kind of grid pattern. "Thank you, sir." I suppose the formality was part of their society. I was so close to not being alone. A little obedience was worth it. When I made it to Piper, I could see the writing on the wall. It was covered in names, all signed in red. In the center was Master Volp's name scribbled like it had been written with a feather, dipped in mercury. "Welcome, Mehmet, to Moon and Vine's Hall of Fame. You can sign next to my name." Piper waved his hand over his name written in stark red block letters. Then he handed me a knife. Its sharp point glinted in the wall's candlelight. He didn't need to say anything else. I knew what I had to do. I would earn my place in Piper's historic order with my signature in blood. I curled my hand around the handle's moon and vine insignia and took a deep breath. I turned my eyes to the far corner of the wall to shield myself from the crimson that would soon be gushing from my hand. That was when I saw them. The names that Piper was standing in front of. The one I remember was Drew P. The piercing sound of fear thundered in my ears. My breath caught in my throat, and I threw the knife down. It sliced my other hand as it fell to the floor. I didn't have time to feel the pain as I turned to run, but tripped over one of the mounds. I scrambled to the side of the room where it looked smoother. I crashed into one of the shadowy figures. Adrenaline surged for what I thought would be a fight. I wasn't sure what Moon and Vine wanted me for, but it wasn't my brotherhood. Instead of a punching fist, I saw the acolyte's hood fall off. It didn't move. Its body was hard plastic. I looked into its mannequin face and saw the glasses from Drew P.S. missing poster. My memory is thin after that. My legs were carrying me, but I can only remember still images. The last one I can see is Piper's face in the shadows. He wasn't angry or sad. He was laughing. I had given him what he wanted when he saw my fear. I only know what happened next from the sheriff's report. Deputy Woods writes that he nearly struck a man in his late teens coming down the highway. Warnick claims that the man seemed drunk but passed the breathalyzer. He writes, man stated, in the woods, in the house, in the basement. Man then fell silent and collapsed. Man was delivered to campus security, who returned him to his dorm. A couple days later, the story made the papers. A rural county sheriff's office found a burial ground for college runaways in the basement of an abandoned mansion. It eventually made the national news. The bloody wall of names even did the rounds on the edgier places of the internet. But despite all the press, no one ever mentioned Moon and Vine. Or Piper. It's been months since that night. The federal investigators have almost identified all the 25 bodies that were buried in the mounds. The families have come to receive all the personal effects that have been placed on the mannequins. I'm alive. I should be happy. Grateful even. I am most days. But every so often, there's a long, lonely night when I wish Piper would come back. Those nights, I hate myself for running. The scar on my hand reminds me how close I came. Even underground, the members of Moon and Vine were not alone. Story 3. Norana, 678. My name is Josh. This happened to me in 2010, back when I had just started college. At the time, Instagram had just launched. It wasn't the giant it is now back then. It was just a simple photo sharing app that people were getting curious about. Everyone around campus was downloading it, trying it out, posting random shots of food or their dorms. I'll admit I got hooked fast. I remember my first few pictures. The cafeteria food that looked like prison slop, a blurry selfie with my roommate Evan. Even a dumb picture of my sneakers because everyone was doing it. It felt fun, new, like a digital photo album we could all carry in our pockets. That's when I got a notification that someone wanted to follow me. Username, Norana, 678. I didn't recognize the name. And back then, people didn't really add strangers, they just followed their friends. It was a little weird, but I thought maybe it was someone from class. So I accepted. A few minutes later, I took a photo of myself in my dorm room mirror and sent to her with the caption, "Do I know you?" Her reply came fast. A picture of a teddy bear with the words, "I know you." I didn't think too much of it. Maybe she was being flirty. Maybe it was just a joke. I laughed it off and sent her another selfie, pulling a stupid face, writing, "You sure?" LOL. She replied, "You're cute." For a while, it felt harmless. She'd comment nice things, send me emojis or little random photos. A tree, a bird, her shoes. I didn't think much of it until the next day. I was sitting in the cafeteria scrolling through my phone when I got a new DM from her. Another picture, but this one was of me, sitting in the cafeteria. In that exact moment, my stomach dropped. I looked around. No one was pointing a phone at me. No one was laughing or whispering like it was a prank. I messaged her immediately. "Who are you? Where are you?" She answered almost instantly. "I saw you." I typed back, fingers shaking. "Yeah, I know. Why didn't you come up and talk to me then?" Her response made my skin crawl. It was impossible. "You're just so cute." That night I confronted my friends one by one, thinking it had to be one of them messing with me. But they all swore they had nothing to do with it. And they sounded genuine. Too genuine. I should have blocked her then. But I didn't. Over the next week, her photos became constant. Not just one or two. Dozens. Then hundreds. She'd send me pictures of myself in the library, in class, walking across campus, even sitting outside eating lunch. It was like she was everywhere at once. The strangest part? Nobody else noticed. No one ever seemed to be taking pictures of me. And yet every day my inbox was flooded. It only stopped when I ignored her completely. That's when the real nightmare began. One night, I woke up at 4:45 a.m. to my phone, buzzing nonstop. Over 1,000 notifications. My DMs were full of pictures again. 10 of them made my blood run cold. They were of me, sleeping. The first was taken from across the room. The next, closer. Each photo crept nearer, until the last one was just my face, my eyes shut, my mouth slightly open, the blanket pulled to my chest. My roommate Evan was gone for the week, visiting family. I had locked the door before bed. And when I woke up, it was still locked from the inside. I called the police right away. They took it seriously at first. Looked through my phone. Interviewed people on my floor. But there was nothing to go on. No fingerprints. No signs of forced entry. No witnesses. After a few weeks, the case was closed for a lack of evidence. I blocked Norena, 678. And like magic, the pictures stopped. For 15 years, I tried to convince myself it was over. I even let myself believe maybe it was some weird glitch, some insane prank I just never figured out. Life went on, until this morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table, scrolling through the news, eating breakfast. That's when my phone buzzed. New message from Norena, 678. I hadn't seen that name in 15 years. Hands trembling, I opened the photo. It was me, eating breakfast. Only, the picture was taken through the window right behind me. I remember looking out that same window, just minutes before, and seeing nobody there. Not a soul. The caption under the photo made my heart stop. You're still so cute. I wanted to go in and talk to you, but it's scary to talk to you during the day when you're awake. See you tonight instead, smiley face. I'm writing this now, hoping that if I die tonight, my story gets pushed out. Well, it would do now, but I'm getting kind of tired. I'm probably going to go to bed. Good night, sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite. Story 4. Sleep deprivation demons. This may come as a surprise to those of you with a healthy sleep schedule, but a lack of sleep can act as a kind of hallucinogen. It actually increases the amount of dopamine produced, as well as certain serotonin receptors, causing mild visual and auditory hallucinations to occur. These increase in intensity the longer one goes without sleeping, and, as I found out recently, can become worse than real. I started skipping sleep during college. Not every day or anything, just a study, or if I stayed up too late, and was worried I would sleep through my alarms. Every couple weeks or so, I would load up on caffeine and vampire my way through the night. But I hated how it made me feel the next day. I'd space out, forgetting the words coming out of my mouth as I'd say them. I'd be unable to remember why I entered a room seconds after entering. Honestly, the closest comparison I can make is being a little high all day, but not a fun high, a sluggish, foot dragging, eye sagging, but that doesn't stop until you fall into bed, ideally in the later evening. I never intended for this to become a habit. I think my brain decided at some point it was fine with feeling a little slow as long as it got a healthy dose of dopamine. The older I got, the more comfortable I became going without sleep, but nothing like how it's been recently. Before my sister died, I was probably going sleepless at least once a week. She passed almost 2 months ago, and that cycle has reversed. I can't rest most days, and after 5 or 6 my body would essentially force a shutdown. I'll sleep anywhere from 12 to 20 hours, but it's not restful. I don't wake up feeling refreshed. I wake up still exhausted, still feeling that high, still seeing her face cobbled together in that casket. It was a car accident, not even anyone's fault. She was driving a beaten-up sedan that was mine back in high school. The brakes gave out on the interstate when she was on her way to get the car tuned up, slammed into the back of a pickup at 70 miles an hour. Losing your best friend like that, so fast and violent, should send a shock wave through your soul. You should be able to know, in some impossible way, that something horrible has happened. But that's not real life. I was at work, I got the call, I cried, a part of me broke forever. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. So, here I am, a month after the funeral. I was one of 5 that attended. The other 4 are friends, who all wish their condolences through their own tears. All of them told me to get some sleep, only one managing to not look put off by me in some way. I can't really blame them. I did the best I could to pull myself together. But my appearance left a lot to be desired, and it's only gotten worse alongside my sleeping habits. The bags under my eyes have nearly calcified. Rotten, black masses encasing my lower eyelids. The hair that hasn't fallen out sticks together in clumps. I've lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. I'm guessing about 10 pounds since she died. I haven't worked up the nerve to actually check on the scale, but the skin on my wrist didn't always cling to the bone like it does now. My legs shake when I walk. My hands too when doing anything other than resting at my side. Physically, I'm not doing great. Whatever's going on in my head, though, is much worse. And before anyone gets in the comments trying to tell me that melatonin exists, believe me, I'm well fucking aware. I've taken the gummies. I've taken the medicine, over the counter and prescribed. I've done it all, and they only threaten to submerge me deeper into the psychosis. Combined with the grief, I've truly felt like I've lost a portion of my sanity these past few weeks. I really do think I can still trust myself, though. That's why I'm writing this. I need outside judgment, and since she died, I don't really have anyone to talk to about it. 2 days ago, I was the worst I'd ever been. I think it was sometime around 3 in the morning, and I was watching TV. A documentary I barely remember. Sometimes I'll put on boring movies or shows to try and coax my brain into turning itself off. But instead, I was half awake, flipping through my phone. When you're not really paying attention to what you're looking at, the tiny visions play tricks on you. Those little eye floaters that move away from where you look will suddenly seem to dart from the side of your vision. And they mess with me all the time. My brain thinks they're a mouse or a bug, and at that moment, one got me, a sudden movement to my right, and my head involuntarily shot to look. Nothing as always, but in my newly drawn attention, I heard something to my left, a barely perceptible noise that resembled somebody inhaling. I turned towards the television, thinking at the source, when I saw it, not more imaginary movement, but a presence, a face, inches from mine, dominated my periphery, just outside of focus. Instead of screaming, flinching, or even shifting my gaze, I froze, stared ahead wide-eyed, for the first time in months, soaking in blue light from the television. I couldn't look at it. I was terrified that acknowledging this intruder would lead to something horrible. I focused forward, but tried to identify what was quietly wheezing in my ear. I could tell it was a pale gray, with pink blotches creeping across its skin. Dark patches were scattered across the pink, and brunette hair hung down over its crooked nose. Because I was so fixated on it, the nasally pained gasp became all I could hear. It seemed impossible that I didn't hear it sooner. Air clawed its way through this thing, every breath in and out seeming to tear something new. I probably would have stayed there in shock forever, if it wasn't for that last exhale. Before that one, I couldn't feel anything. I only heard the face struggling. But with the final wheeze, its mouth opened and wafted a hot, sickly wind onto my neck. My body reacted before I could tell it to, lurching away from the source. Nothing but my dimly lit living room and the somber music of the movie's credits filling the void. I had never been more awake in my life. I turned on every light I could and paced through my house, checking every corner I could ensure I was alone. From what I could tell, I slowly made my way to the bathroom, looking over my shoulder at every turn. I crept in, closed the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked awful. At least that was normal. I splashed water on my face, and when I looked back up, I laughed to myself. A nightmare. I thought I had fallen asleep for a few minutes and got scared awake. I brushed my teeth to get the stale taste from my mouth, stole one last look at myself, and reached for the door handle. When I did, I noticed something at the bottom of the door. Darkness. There wasn't any light on the other side. Normally I would attribute it to slip in my mind, but after that nightmare, I was more focused than I've ever been. I knew that the hallway should be lit, yet I could see its absence through the crack of the frame. I turned the handle slowly, and opened it even slower, just enough to where I could peek through. The bathroom light poured through the crack, and into the completely black house. Every light was off. I scanned all that I could see. My bedroom's door was half open, offering a sliver of view inside, and the light only illuminated half of the hall, sputtering out before it could reach the end. I instinctively reached for my phone to use as a flashlight, but realized it was still on the couch. Cursing myself, I opened the door a little more, hoping to brighten my view as much as possible. It lit the hallway completely, and I could see the end. I let out a small sigh of relief, a sigh I immediately sucked back in when I looked into my room. Hiding behind my door, glaring through the inches-wide crack between it and the frame, was a woman. Even just a fraction of her I could see, with bruising covering the skin that wasn't scraped off, and her hair matted to a peeled scalp. I knew it was her. I knew from the one-eye peering through. People always told us we looked nothing alike, besides our big hazel eyes, though this one staring at me was bloodshot and half-burned. I knew I was just a few feet away from my sister. "Tara?" I stammered into the dark. "Tom, why?" She choked, instantly bringing back the sweet voice I was resigned to never hearing again. But it was forced, as dry and painful as the sliver of her that showed. "Why awake?" I stared ahead, unsure how to respond, or even process what I was experiencing. "Tom, why?" "Yes. Sorry, I'm sorry. Should end awake. I know that." I yelled, louder than I meant to. My hand gripped the door handle, so hard I'm surprised it didn't pop off. How are you here?" "I buried you, watched you sink into the ground. I saw your face. You were stitched together with wire and thread. They had to dash." I stopped mid-sentence when my eyes met hers again. Tears gently rolled down her skin cheek. The labored breaths became shorter as she cried through the corner. As I watched the tears fall, I realized for the first time she wasn't wearing clothes. The bruising on her face was mimicked across her entire side. Bone poked through her skeletal ribcage, and the flesh was torn entirely from her leg, hip to heel. I really want die. I slammed the door shut and locked it. I had regained my senses. Another nightmare. I was just in another horrible dream, and if I knew that, I could wake up. But no matter how hard I pinched myself or shook my head, I couldn't do it. "Tom, why, please?" She was right outside the door now, no longer mumbling through broken gasps. She was pleading with all the voice she could summon. I heard nails drag down the wood paneling. The lock began to shake as my sister's visage tried to get in. "You sleep? Please." I cupped my hands over my ears and rocked back and forth. Tears of my own poured out across my face, and piss seeped onto the floor beneath me. Even in that moment of overwhelming terror, I thought about how much I looked like a scared child. "I am asleep, Tara. You're just a nightmare. I'll sleep if you just leave." "No, T.O.M. I'm wide awake." Even through her broken voice, I was able to make out the distinct tone of desperation. She was begging as if her own ended life was at stake. I first more calm, ing. Her screams echoed to the small bathroom, shaking the floor with each word. "Sleep protect, I can't." Suddenly, the door stopped shaking. Her voice ceased rattling in my head. I took my hands from my ears, and after a few minutes, managed to stand up on my wobbling legs. I hesitantly put my ear to the door. Silence. "Tara?" No response. My hand shook as I wrapped it around the handle again. I cracked the door, slower than I've done anything in my life, and searched the dark, empty hallway. My eyes shot to the corner of the door. She wasn't there. A tentative sigh left my lungs. Then, something dark moved to my left. I yelped and turned my head, my entire body recoiling. But it was nothing. An eye floater playing a trick on my mind again. Before I could think of calming down, another shadow darted across my periphery. My head spun toward another empty section of house. Another flicked above me, and my neck craned back to see nothing but the ceiling. Then stomping, the loudest thing I have ever heard, rushing up the stairs. I angled my neck just in time to see two naked men, rounding the corner and sprinting toward me. Pale skin betrayed every cut and blemish on the first man's body. He looked like he'd been dragged through a field of glass, and his eyes bulged in their sockets, as if trying to leap from his hairless head. The second was almost green, encased in lesions and pustules, threatening to pop with each lumbering step. I registered this in less than a second as I slammed the door shut and locked it. The force of their impact on the wood pushed me down. My head collided with the sink, and I clutched it in pain. Their wailing on the door was the only thing that kept me conscious. Blow after blow, the one barrier between me and them threatened to buckle. I clambered to my feet, blood dripping from my forehead and threatening to blind me. Without thinking, I unlocked the bathroom window. It wasn't wide enough for me to carefully climb out, and I knew that. Once it was open, I took a step back and dove through just as I heard the door collapse behind me. I fell 2 stories and tried to angle my body to where I could roll off the impact, but I was injured, panicked, and more exhausted than I had ever been. I hit the pavement and lost consciousness. I woke up in an empty hospital room, my head throbbing. A kind Samaritan had apparently found me and called an ambulance. I called out for anyone, and a nurse entered my room, looking pleasantly surprised. "Hi, sleepyhead. How are you feeling?" "My head hurts." I mumbled back, my hands reaching for the cut on my face, but the nurse stopped me. "Oh no, don't do that. We had to give you a couple of stitches, and you need to let them settle. You probably have a minor concussion as well, but your normal speech is a good sign." I looked around the room for a clock. "How long have I been out?" "About 14 hours since you arrived. Not sure how long you were out in the cold, though once again, I didn't feel rested. I felt like I'd just been pulled out of an awful dream. I'm going to get the doctor, okay? She's going to have some questions about how you ended up unconscious on the sidewalk." The nurse moved to leave the room. "Wait." I sputtered. She turned, a slight look of surprise on her face. "Was I? Did the paramedics see anyone else with me when they picked me up?" "They didn't say anything about that." "Why? Who would have been with you?" I stared blankly for a moment, then shook my head. "No one, it's fine. Just not the best state to be seen in, you know?" The nurse chuckled as she stepped out of the room. When the doctor finally got to me, I made up a story about slipping out of the window while smoking. Not a great lie, but one that kept me out of the psych ward. She ran me through the dangers of sleep deprivation, no shit lady, and prescribed me some antibiotics and painkillers. When I left the hospital, the last place I wanted to go was back home, but I don't have many other places to crash. So after stalling for a few hours, I made my way back. The first thing I checked was the bathroom door. I expected to see it reduced to splinters, but it was solid. No markings, dents, or scratches. Just a normal door, swung wide to reveal the open bathroom window I threw myself out of. I've been writing this ever since. I keep looking over my shoulder, seeing the same tiny movements just out of focus. I know I need to sleep, but every time I think of my sister's voice or the heavy footsteps of those men hurtling towards me, I get a renewed shot of anxiety that spurs me awake. I have to be losing it. I know that, but a part of me hopes I'm not. Even though I've never been more scared in my own house, I take comfort in knowing that my big sister might be looking out for me. If that wasn't a nightmare, if she crossed the veil to protect me from whatever those men were, it might be worth missing a few more nights of sleep to see her again. Story 5. I was hired as a substitute teacher. I'm not sure what I'm teaching. I lost my job last year after the divorce. My ex-wife's father owned the company. He let me go with a modest severance package. It was a dark time. For about 6 months, I drank, morning until night. A slow, pathetic suicide. It's harder than it seems. Killing yourself, every morning, I'd wake up like some malfunctioning phoenix. I just wanted it to be over, to descend into sweet darkness and feel nothing. Then, in September, my debit card was declined. That sound that scratched the machine made, indicating I had no money. That even here, amongst my derelict peers, I was on the bottom. I began to look for jobs. Any jobs. I found it on Craigslist. Substitute teacher. Gifted/special education. I've never been a kid person. Don't like them, don't hate them. But I was desperate. Driving through the long, winding road to school was like being transported in time. Jeffersonian buildings evoked a Virginian antebellum aesthetic. Tall, majestic oaks lent their shadows in the summer heat. Everyone in the area knew the school. Private, elite. Graduates went to Yale, Harvard, Wharton. 2 vice presidents and 1 Speaker of the House were alumni. My Camry felt out of place in the parking lot. But, like I said, I was desperate. When I walked in, the receptionist looked at me, knowing, "You're here for the substitute teaching job?" I nodded. "Come with me." She walked down a long hall. I followed. We stopped at a large, industrial door with a keypad. The numbers beeped, echoing down the hall as she typed in a code. An airlock whooshed as the door opened, and steps down into an underground area. She stopped at the top of the stairs, motioned for me to continue down. This is as far as I go. I hesitated. Something wasn't right. This didn't add up. She sensed it. We pay in cash. Daily. I'm not proud of it. But, like I said, I was desperate. What? I began. Instructions are on the table. She turned around and walked out, the door humming as it closed, settling into place with clank. The air compressors kicked in, sealing the door. My footsteps were muted as I went down, like something was absorbing the sound. At the bottom, a small hallway stretched out to another door, round, like a hobbit door. Curious now, I walked towards it. My hands caressed it. Thick, rich wood, warm to the touch. It felt alive. To the left of the door was a small cubby with a paper. It simply read rules. Underneath, these children are special children, scholarship students who board at Westlake. For their success and your safety, the following rules must be followed. 1. When the children start whispering, do not turn your back on them. 2. 3. The nurse will take them out sometimes. When they come back, do not make eye contact for 15 minutes. 4. 5. Do not try and help them after their nurse's visits. 6. 7. Insubordination must be immediately punished by pressing the button. 8. 9. Your payment is in the envelope. Do not take it until the day is done. 10. Failure to adhere will absolve management of responsibility for harm. Weird, but there was an envelope under the sheet with 7 crisp $100 bills. The lure of quick cash override any misgivings I had. Just then the bell rang. I walked to the hobbit door, which was now cracked open. Inside was a classroom. Oddly enough, the children filed in from another entrance. 27 of them, second graders. They seemed normal, just a little quiet. A folder on the desk had my lesson plans for the day. I began teaching. At around 10 a.m., the children had recess. They exited their door. I watched through the window as they ran outside, onto a lawn, and began running back and forth. Suddenly it struck me, we were underground, or so I thought. How was this level with the ground outside? Maybe the rear of the school went downhill, and I just hadn't noticed it as I came in. When they came back in, their energy was lower. I was writing on the chalkboard when it started, a faint whispering, like the rustling of fall leaves. My hand froze on the chalkboard. I tried to turn, but I was stuck. The whispering grew, like bees' angry humming. The lights dimmed, taking on a late evening glow. Heart hammering, I summoned all my will and moved my head about a quarter of an inch. On the edge of my vision, a shadowy form loomed where the first desk was. As I looked, it coalesced into one of the students. The whispering grew angry, but I felt its grip on me loosen. I moved my head further, and more shadowy forms congealed into young children. I wrenched my neck, facing class. The sound shattered, and everything came to normal. The lights brightened. After a long moment, one of the boys raised his hand. Yes, sir? I didn't know his name. Johnny, he said. Yes, Johnny, I replied. The answer is 7, he said. It took me a moment. Then it struck me. He was solving the problem I had written on the board, like nothing had ever happened. "That's is correct," I stammered. Just then bell rang. I looked at the clock. Somehow it was 2:45. Dismissal time. 2.5 hours had just disappeared. I watched as these children, who had just moments ago been something else, as they stood up and ran out the door. I felt lucky to be alive. Grabbed the envelope, ran up the stairs, through the compression of the doors. As I walked out, I saw her. She looked surprised. "You're alive." I nodded. "Yes. Okay. See you tomorrow." She asked. I touched the wad of cash in my pocket. Thought about the party I'd be throwing tonight. "Yes," I said, walking out into the afternoon. The sun was warm, but as I looked at the school, my heart skipped in my chest. Behind it, hills rose into the Blur Ridge Mountains. The wind blew, the rustle of the leaves like a whisper. My blood ran cold. I needed a drink. Story 6. I watched a kid vanish inside a water slide. I wish I never went looking for her. There were 4 children queuing to go down the water slide. "Wait," I said, showing my palm to a little girl with pink goggles. A squeal burst through her lips as she waited for the red light to go green. "Just wait there," I repeated, watching the kid who'd gone before it spat into the pool below. "Okay, sitting up or lying on your back. Don't go head first." The girl skipped forward and sat shaking with excitement in front of the jets that poured water down the lazy coil of the slide. Over the yawning mouth of the covered plastic chute, a sign emphasizes that this slide is not, by any stretch of the imagination, for thrill seekers. Take it easy on the Zambezi. The light went green, and before I could say anything, the girl scooted herself over the lip, down the slide, and around the bend, the shrill warble of her scream making me wince. "Next," I said, massaging the area around my right ear. A little boy with a streak of dried snot below both nostrils waddled forwards, and on my signal, he gripped the bar, hurled himself into the chute, and flipped onto his belly. "Turn over," I said, but it was too late. I stood up to see him plunge into the pool in a graceless backward sprawl, but the lifeguard down on poolside gave me a thumbs up, letting me know he was uninjured, and I let my gaze linger for a moment as she pulled her heel up onto the chair with 2 manicured hands. Turning back around, I lectured the penultimate child in the queue, a pale girl with hair so blonde it was almost white. "Don't do that, okay? Sitting up or lying on your back only. I'm not trying to be a killjoy. I'm trying to keep you safe. That's my job." The girl's eyes never met mine. Instead, she looked into the shadows of the Zambezi, which are made thick and soupy by the color of the plastic, an opaque brown. One day, no doubt in a drab, gray office somewhere, a water slide designer passed over a host of bright and marvelous colors, only to choose brown. Nothing screams fun like brown, right? "Are you ready?" I asked the pale girl, but her eyes seemed far away, like she was sleepwalking. There was no fidgeting, no giggling, no cheekiness, even. She looked duty-bound to go down the slide. With one serene push, she entered the chute, gliding around the bend. I waited for her to pop out at the bottom, using the opportunity to look at the lifeguard again. Her tan skin, her air of indifference. Something about the new lifeguard was magnetic to me, bewitching. She met my eye, frowned, looked away, glanced up again, curled her lip in disgust. "What?" she mouthed. I was staring at her. "Stop staring. Stop it. Has the girl left the slide yet?" I shouted down, but the lifeguard didn't hear me. I scanned the empty splash zone. Had the girl landed and climbed out while I'd been gawking at my colleague? Surely I hadn't been distracted for that long. I checked the cameras, only to see a steady stream of water rushing along the bottom of the chute. The girl was nowhere to be seen. "Can I go yet?" asked the boy who was last in line. Yeah, I suppose, I said, distracted and in disbelief. The boy went down the slide, and I tracked his progress on the cameras all the way to the bottom. He climbed out of the pool and trotted towards the changing rooms as a lifeguard climbed down from her perch. I'd half expected him to plow into the girl on his way down, but he showed no sign of his trip on the slide being anything other than routine. I shut down the camera feed and the water jets from the control panel. I locked the gate behind me and set about hosing plasters and hairballs into gutters by the walkway. With everything squared away, I switched off the lights, but a sound prevented me from heading out to the foyer. A thud from inside the Zambezi. "Hello," I said, my voice echoing across the tops of folding chairs in the viewing gallery to the back wall some 80 meters distant. All I heard was the steady dripping of a tap, a sound very much in the realm of the ordinary at the swimming pool. That thud, however, was not. I strode along the poolside, taking care not to slip, especially because it was pitch dark. The only illumination came from fire exit signs above doors. A grim scenario entered my mind where I'd fall, bang my head and slide unconscious into the water beneath the pool cover. Even if I came to my senses, I'd have to struggle fully clothed against its smothering weight. "Hello? Anyone there?" I called out from the bottom of the stairs, leading up to the Zambezi's mouth. No reply, but that creaking thud had to be her, right? I'd seen that little girl go down the slide. I swear I had. I unlocked the gate and climbed up, crouching at the entrance to the slide itself, listening to a faint pulsing, a quiet heaving. It was the sound of a dying man breathing through a respirator at the opposite end of a hospital corridor. Slow, weak, helpless. The thought of the scared little girl somehow trapped in the slide made me step forward into its now dry throat. It was a squeeze, but I could just about navigate my way around the bend. Here, I truly left a light behind. All focus now switched to what I could hear. My footsteps knocked hollow against plastic as I groped forwards and my breathing quickened. I started sweating. A fingernail from the cold hand of claustrophobia tickled my neck. My eyes bulged in their sockets. As I began to question what I was doing, I heard it. A voice, soft and song-like, echoed all around me. "Have you come to rescue me?" Yes, I have." "Where are you? Why did you come?" "Because it's my job." "Now, come on. Let's get you out of here and back to your grown-up." "And you wouldn't have come if it wasn't your duty?" "No, I would have." "Liar," shouted the voice, suddenly venomous. The slide tremored in tandem with the outburst, and I fell back onto my haunches in shock. It didn't feel like I was talking to a little girl anymore, but when the voice spoke again, it was once more songbird. "I like you. Thanks." "Do you like me?" "Yes." "We're friends then, I suppose." One of the best things about friendship is the gifts friends give each other. I love gifts. There was no obvious response I could conjure in that moment, but despite the pressing darkness, I felt watched, perceived, and there was something expectant about that regard. I reached into the pockets of my shorts and rummaged for a half-empty pack of chewing gum. I held it out in front of me on a flat palm. "You can have this if you like." The tiny packet was snatched from me and replaced with a different item. "Thank you. And it's freely offered? This gift?" "Of course. Have you given me a gift too?" I said, gulping. The voice was chewing now. "Oh, that? Yeah. Give it to that lifeguard you want to fuck. It's an exact replica of the yellow tulip on the front of the diary she writes in every night." Blushing, my hand closed around the stem, and I felt my way up to the petals. The thing in the slide with me was most definitely not a child, and nobody knew I wanted to do that apart from me, but that wasn't the only thing I wanted. I'm not like other guys. You don't need to breathe like a hunted thing, friend. She's repulsed by you anyway. Repulsed. Most everyone is. You're a jot above worthless. I thought back to the ugly look the lifeguard had given me when I'd stared at her. Was it true? What are you? She doesn't want to fuck you, la la la. She doesn't want to fuck you, la la la. She doesn't want to fuck you. Fuck you, sang the voice, and I don't want to fuck her. But you didn't answer my question. Oh, so what do you want to do to her? Nothing so grandiose and treacherous as love her, I hope. I bit my lip. You didn't answer my question, I said after a moment. What do you believe I am? A scared little girl? No, I thought you were. But now, the Zambezi creaked again. The source of the sound was somewhere ahead of me. A rush of warm air wafted against my face as the breathing I'd heard as I entered the slide returned. It was louder now, closer, hungrier. Do you believe I'm real? The mouth that spoke those words couldn't have been more than an inch from the tip of my nose. Its pitch had deepened. But behind the menace, I sensed a vulnerability. It was as though the thing needed my validation to exist. Smelling its hot, putrid breath and hearing the plastic groan as whatever was in the chute with me moved around, I very much believed it was real. And I almost said so. Almost. No. I came in here to help a little girl I thought was stuck. It seems I was mistaken, but I'm going to keep searching anyway. 30 long seconds went by. A minute. 2. I'll help you, the voice said, and the creaking in the slide advanced towards me. No, I'll be fine, thanks. I squeaked as the presence barged through and past me and out the top of the slide. The air inside the chute cooled. The charge in the air dissipated. My goosebumps settled, and then I heard a quick was followed by a swishing, sloshing sound. I screamed as my feet were swept from under me and the back of my head crashed against the bottom of the chute. I felt myself sliding around and around and around until the bottom of the Zambezi was no longer flush to my back. I was airborne for a split second, and then I was underwater for an eternity, submerged in the splash zone with my trainers somehow higher than my head. I fought to right myself, twisting around. I felt the sting of water rushing into my nostrils and realized I was facing the surface. Pushing off the pool floor with one foot, I opened my lungs to receive a full breath, but only managed to fill them with chlorinated water as the pool cover batted me back down. Underwater, I retched, swallowed more water, and forced my eyes open in search of the side of the pool. If I could get there, I could pull myself out at the edge of the cover. But where was it? Splotches danced across my vision to the tune of a throbbing ring in my ears, growing in volume with every heartbeat. Time was running out. I couldn't see any walls, and was about to pick a direction blindly before I realized what I could see, the dim outline of tiles beneath my feet. I swiveled in a frantic circle and spotted a tile, half cracked and half chipped, where countless children had planted their feet after the Zambezi ejected them. From here, I knew the wall was somewhere to my right. I darted for it and erupted through that small gap between the pool cover and the walkway, spluttering and dragging in what air I could. Panting and drenched, I hauled myself up and sprinted headlong out of there, not bothering to lock the doors to the center behind me. A rushed, yet wise decision, I think. It will give whatever is in there a chance to leave, if it hasn't already. With shaking hands, I went to dig my car keys out of my pockets and shrieked. Something was in my hand. I'd been unknowingly clutching it ever since the encounter in the slide. The tulip. I snapped the stem, threw it down on the gravel, scraped the sole of my shoe over the pedals, and flattened it with the wheels of my car as I drove away. Story 7. If you don't finish the dorm sprint before the lights go out, you don't return. Back then, I was still living in the dorms, like every college or university. We had our own traditions, stupid challenges, and student-made games. Ours was something called the 3x500 sprint. It was a running game. The dorm we lived in was a massive complex, 3 long buildings arranged in a half circle. They were connected on the 3rd floor by an insanely long corridor. That hallway was said to be roughly 3 by 500 feet long, so about 1,500 feet total. And twice a year, the 3 by 500 sprint was held. They would wedge open every single door along the hallway so you could make one continuous sprint from one end to the other. But of course, it wasn't that simple. The race took place in the middle of the night. so you had to run in complete silence, quiet enough that the supervisors wouldn't hear you. The lights along the hallway were on a timer. They stayed on for 3 minutes, then the entire floor went pitch black. And if that wasn't enough, the whole thing started with a drinking challenge. Right before the sprint, every participant had down a 15-ounce cocktail. It was a warm, disgusting mix of nearly every type of alcohol you could imagine, and you had to drink it all in one go. That was our little tribal dorm tradition. At least, that was the game part. There was also a legend. If someone didn't make it across before the lights went out, they never came back. I was a second-year law student when I decided to join the race. I downed the cocktail, and the race was on. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me. No way I could let Neil beat me. He'd never shut up about it for the rest of the year. I was doing pretty well. I was in second place in the race. But then my body started to get tired, maybe because of the alcohol. So one of the guys behind me tried to overtake me. Our legs got tangled. I went flying and crashed hard onto the floor. The onlookers gasped in unison. The guy who tried to pass me also fell, but he was burning with competitive spirit. He jumped up and kept running, limping as he went. I just lay there on the ground. Humiliated, I wasn't far from the finish. Damn it, but I stayed down, staring at the ceiling, and then the lights went out. 3 minutes were up. I sat up and rubbed my head. "Okay, guys, turn the lights back on," I called out, but there was no answer. The hallway was completely dark. I couldn't see a single light. Couldn't even hear the others anymore. "Hello? Can someone please turn the lights back on?" I started feeling around and found the walls, but they were strangely smooth, not like the old, familiar dorm walls. I pulled my phone out of my pocket to use the flashlight. That's when I saw it. The hallway was the same, but the doors were gone. There weren't any, at least not as far as I could see, because my phone's light didn't seem to pierce the darkness. I could barely see 1 yard ahead of me. Where the hell was I? I jerked my head around nervously. What the hell is going on? Are the others messing with me? Or what the fuck is this? The alcohol had already worn off. I slowly started moving forward, trying to find the light switch. But the walls were smooth, like mirrors. No doors, no cracks, no switch anywhere. I stumbled forward through the darkness, using my phone for light as best I could. No signal, no service at all. What the hell is this place? I must have taken a bad fall too. My leg was aching and my arm hurt like hell. This place was starting to really get to me. How did I even end up here? "Hello," I shouted into the darkness. "Is anyone there?" Nothing. No response. I was alone, standing in the thick blackness, trembling, growing more and more tense. Then suddenly I heard a voice. It sounded like it came from behind me, down the opposite end of the hallway. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I turned around, eyes straining to see into the dark. That was my voice. I stood frozen. An echo? Maybe? I figured it was better to just keep hobbling in the original direction. Maybe I really would find a way out. I didn't think the last building could be far now. The finish line should be somewhere around there. At least, that's what I told myself. The darkness felt suffocating. I could barely see anything, even with my phone's flashlight on. How can darkness be this thick? It was like the light couldn't even cut through it. Then I heard something. Footsteps. Distant, muffled. Someone was stomping, or more like thundering footsteps approaching, maybe even running. I froze in the dark, heart racing, waiting to hear what it was. And it definitely sounded like it was getting closer. No matter how hard I stared into the black, I couldn't see a thing. The pounding footsteps grew louder until I could feel the floor trembling under my feet. Then, something moved in the dark. In the beam of my phone's light, I saw a massive shape. I couldn't tell if it was human or something else, but it was so big it stretched from floor to ceiling, wall to wall. Terrified, I stumbled backward. Whatever it was, I started running, but it sounded like it was running too. I heard the stomping, not like something with 2 feet, more like 100 pounding footsteps chasing after me. The hallway didn't change. No matter how far I ran, it just kept going, endlessly, and The thing behind me was still gaining. I ran until my aching leg finally gave out, and I collapsed again. I lay sprawled on the floor. My phone had flown out of my hand and was shining up at the ceiling. I covered my head with my arms. Whatever was coming, I hoped I could somehow shield myself from it. And then I realized the stomping was gone, like it had vanished into thin air. Once again, that dead silence settled over the hallway, along with the crushing dark. I crawled over my phone and snatched it up. It was the only solid thing left in this nightmare of a place. Once I pulled myself together and managed to stand up, I finally noticed the hallway had changed. Now, on both sides, doors lined the walls as far as I could see. But even now, my phone's light couldn't pierce the swirling darkness ahead. None of the doors worked. I had been trying them one after another for what felt like minutes. But every single one led to nothing but solid wall, like someone had bricked them all shut. I was terrified and hopeless. How the hell was I supposed to get out of here? What was this place? But at least I'd learned one thing. If I kept moving, the place seemed to shift. So I started walking again, deeper into the darkness, lighting the way just enough to see a couple feet ahead of me. The doors continued, lined up endlessly on both sides of the hallway. I moved forward cautiously. I didn't even bother with the doors anymore. There was no point. Then suddenly, as I shined my light ahead, I saw a pair of human legs. I recoiled in shock. A skeletal man sat on the ground, his face buried in his hands. His long, tangled hair hung down to his shoulders, snow white like that of an old man. His clothes were ragged and hung off him in tatters. He looked like a homeless person. I didn't want anything to do with him. I'd seen enough horror movies to know better than to fall for something like this. I tried to quietly sneak past, but then the old man sprang to his feet. He was a reeking, toothless thing. His eyes were cloudy and gray with cataracts. He lunged at me, clawing with bony hands, striking me wildly. I could barely shove him off. He was screaming the whole time, but I couldn't understand a word. It didn't even sound like he was saying anything that made sense. I grabbed him and pushed him away from me. He slammed into the wall, but it was like he didn't even feel it. He just jumped up and bolted into the darkness, still shrieking as he disappeared. I stood there, gasping for breath. My heart was pounding. Every fiber of my being wanted one thing only: to get the hell out of here, if that was even possible. According to the clock on my phone, I had been wandering these dark hallways for at least 4 hours. At least the phone still worked, though the battery was running low. I hated myself for not charging it earlier in the day. But what really got at me was the hallway itself. I was starting to lose it. I kept feeling like something was following me, or that I heard footsteps behind me, matching mine, ready to pounce the moment I let my guard down. But there was nothing, just the darkness, and the endless row of doors. It was maddening, and then my fear came true. Someone was lying on the ground ahead of me. I saw their bony legs first. They were slumped by the wall, right next to one of the doors. The figure didn't move. I didn't think they were alive anymore. I stepped a little closer and saw it clearly, a dried-out corpse. I hurried past, but further down the hallway, more bodies appeared. One of them was leaning against the door, also dead. They just kept appearing. The hallway was lined with corpses, and they gave off a hideous, rotting stench. Some of them looked ancient, just bare bones. Others looked freshly dead. Each body was in a different position. One was gripping a doorknob. Another knelt facing the wall. Many were simply sprawled out on the ground or slumped against the wall in silence. I didn't know why I kept walking through this corridor of death, but I didn't want to turn around, and I sure as hell didn't want to stop. Covering my nose, I weaved my way between the bodies, step by step through the thick dark. Eventually, I came across the corpse of a young girl. She was lying sprawled across a doorway, and then, far off in the distance, deep within the darkness, I saw a single glowing point. It pierced the thick black, and it looked like it was calling to me. I hurried toward the light. It seemed impossibly far away, but it was the only hope I had. The bodies were still lying around me, but it felt like there were fewer of them now. Another sign, maybe, that I was heading in the right direction, toward the exit. I was practically running, The light was growing closer. The corpses were now scattered sparsely along the hallway. I didn't see the large man's body in time. It was sprawled halfway across the corridor. I stepped on him, tripped, and slammed to the ground. On my knees next to the corpse, I stared at the light in desperation. And that's when I noticed it. It was swaying, moving. It was coming toward me. A breeze swept through the hallway, rank and putrid, reeking of decay. I'd never smelled anything like it. It was a stench of death. I scrambled to my feet. The light was almost there. My throat clenched with panic. My legs trembled. And then it arrived. What I saw in front of me was a nightmare. A massive, slithering mound of human remains was creeping toward me. Limbs, torsos, and chunks of flesh fused together into a grotesque living mass. One severed arm reached forward, holding a glowing orb like some hellish deep-sea anglerfish. From between bones, a jagged mouth had formed, gaping open in the dark. I turned and ran. I didn't care what I stepped on, what corpses I kicked, or what part of this twisted place I crashed through. The thing was chasing me, churning and gurgling behind me, its slimy bulk oozing forward, a writhing avalanche of flesh and bones. And then I saw it. One of the doors up ahead was glowing, or at least, it looked like a light had been turned on behind it. Maybe this was it. My only way out. The creature was gaining. I could feel the heat of its breath, if you could call it that, reek pouring from its jagged mouth, clinging to my skin. The door stayed where it was. The light behind it glowed, calling to me. I reached it. I threw it open and dove inside. Whatever was in there, I'd take it. I woke up in the hallway. The real hallway. The normal dorm. I sat up with a scream. I had been lying on the floor. The others just stared at me, wide-eyed. Everyone was there. Everyone who had joined the race. Neil rushed over to me. "Hey, man," we turned the lights back on. "You're okay," he said, trying to calm me down. "What?" "Neil, what the hell is this? Where the fuck am I?" "The lights went off," Neil said, "and now we turned them back on." According to them, not even a second had passed, and I hadn't been gone for hours. At all. I'm never playing any fucking game again. Story 8. Don't take the apples. It started so small, life-changing events always do. Just one event, one action, one choice, and nothing was ever the same. It actually started as a joke between my mom and I. We were driving home one day when I was just big enough to sit in the front seat when we saw a tipped-over bucket of apples in someone's yard. Mom laughed and said that it looked like someone had been abducted by aliens while they were picking apples. From then on, it became an ongoing inside joke between the two of us. Whenever we would spot someone carrying buckets of apples or picking apples off a tree, we would say, "Don't do it. It's a trap," as we drove by. It was silly, innocent, and harmless. Until it wasn't. I couldn't have been older than 13 when it happened. My cousin was visiting for the weekend. I'll call him Colby. He was a sweet, gangly kid a couple months younger than me, with dark curly hair, round glasses, and hobbies that were just strange enough to earn him the title of weird kid in school. He collected marbles and feathers and could tell you the entire lore of the Final Fantasy franchise if you asked him. He probably would have been diagnosed with autism if he had gotten the chance. We were playing in the front yard, some combination of tag and hide and seek. I was outside all the time then, back when being outside was still fun, and I wasn't anxious all the time, back before I was afraid of my own shadow, and the sight of pine trees didn't make me queasy. Colby suddenly stopped running and pointed. "You're selling apples?" I followed his pointing finger with my eyes until I saw what he was talking about. Tucked slightly away from the road and braced up against one of the big pine trees that lined our driveway was a little wooden booth. It was rickety looking and leaning slightly to one side like it had been made by kids. Buckets of apples were placed on either side of it with a couple more balanced on nearby chairs, and a hand-painted sign on the front of the booth said, "Apples for sale in blotchy, dripping black paint." No, I remember saying with a frown. We had apple trees in our yard, ugly, scabby things that were probably old in the house, and produce a handful of tiny, bruised, sour apples every other year. Nothing we could ever sell. All the neighbors had apple trees of their own anyway. Why would they want to buy ours? Colby laughed, and I don't blame him. The booth was right there, so apparently we were selling apples. That was the only explanation, right? But as I watched Colby walking toward the booth, Mom's ridiculous words came back to me and stopped me from following. "Don't do it. It's a trap." I don't remember if I called for Colby to stop. I want to think that I did, that I actually tried to save him, even though I didn't know what I was saving him from. I wanted to be his fault that he walked up to the booth and picked an apple out of one of the buckets. He ignored my warning, so it's his fault, nothing more I could have done. But I don't remember if I called out to him or if I just watched him go. Watched him walk up to the lopsided booth and pull a fat, red apple, too big to be one of ours, out of the bucket and bite into it, juice dribbling down his chin, too sweet to be one of ours. He turned away from the booth to face me, grinning like he had just gotten away with something illegal. That's how I choose to remember him. The snapshot of his face that I keep tucked away in my mind. Not the stiff, uncomfortable school photo that they used for his funeral, but how he looked right there in that moment. Smudged glasses sitting crooked on his sweat and dirt-smeared face, smiling so wide his face could barely contain it. He had his back to the booth, so he didn't see it coming. I might not remember whether or not I called out to him, but I remember what happened next. It feels like it happened in slow motion, but it couldn't have taken more than a couple of seconds. As soon as Colby turned away from the booth, something moved behind the pine tree and a hand curled around the trunk. Not a human hand. Thinking back, I can't remember what it really looked like. Just a dark, spindly shape against the mossy tree bark. Like one of those scrambled up AI-generated images where there's just enough information for your brain to take a guess at what it's seeing even though you're looking at nonsense. My brain categorized it as a hand, maybe to spare itself from cracking under the strain of what it was really seeing. It was big, big enough to wrap its misshapen fingers all the way around Colby's torso and yank him away faster than I could blink, like a trapdoor spider silently dragging a cricket into its burrow. Colby disappeared behind the tree before he had a chance to scream, not so much as a rustle of leaves. He was still holding the apple. I stood there frozen for a minute. It didn't feel real. It felt like I had just watched a scary scene in a movie and watched everything happen to the eyes of a stranger while the real me was miles away. It wasn't until a blue jay screamed from some hidden place in the trees that I finally jerked back to life. My eyes were burning like I hadn't blinked in days, and my dad was in front of me, shaking me by the shoulders and asking what was wrong. He said he came running when he heard me screaming. I don't remember screaming, but my throat was raw like I had been. I told him something behind the tree had taken Colby. I told him something was hiding behind the tree. I told him not to go near the apples. What apples? I looked past him then, around his body at the spot where Colby had been standing a few seconds ago. The apple booth was gone. There wasn't even a dent in the grass where it had been. Dad called the police after that. There wasn't a trace of Colby anywhere. No hair, no scrap of clothes, no blood. The only sign that he had been at our house at all was his jacket, hanging on a peg in our kitchen. Threadbare denim and a size too small. He never wore it when his mom wasn't around to make him. An officer questioned me. He was a young, fresh-faced man, better suited to be a kindergarten teacher than a police officer. I told him the truth. Something was hiding behind the tree and snatched Colby away. Why did Colby go with him? The officer asked. He didn't. I said, the thing grabbed him and pulled him away. The officer scribbled in his notepad. You said he didn't scream, though? No, it happened too fast. More scribbling. Did you see where it took Colby? Behind the tree. He didn't get into a car? No. Colby went to the apple booth, grabbed an apple, and something pulled him behind the tree. He told you he had apples? I've never wanted to hit someone more than I did right then. I got sent to psychiatrists next. Well-meaning people who want to talk about my feelings, explain what trauma was, and convince me that what I thought I saw was just my mind protecting me from what had actually happened. There was no apple booth. There was no brain-bending monster hiding behind the tree. There was just a sicko who kidnapped Colby and dragged him into a car, or a shed, or the house. And I needed to remember what really happened so they could save him. I was holding up their investigation. I was the key to solving everything. I was the reason they couldn't find Colby. It didn't matter that the sniffer dogs followed Colby's scent to the tree and stopped in their tracks, that they growled and raised their hackles and ran circles around the tree until they dropped from exhaustion. It was my fault. Eventually I started to believe them. When enough grown-ups tell a scared kid that what they saw was just their imagination, it's easier to agree. They were trained professionals. They got paid to be right about this kind of thing. My dad got arrested even though they never found Colby dead or alive, and I let myself believe that that's what happened. Mom got a divorce, took back her maiden name. We moved to a different state where no one knew us, and did our best to start over. Colby became a bitter memory that I shoved into the basement of my mind, only surfacing in nightmares for years until even those started to fade. I might have managed to forget about it entirely if it wasn't for what I just saw and my reason for writing all of this down. I'm an adult now, living on my own in a little house on the edge of town. Nothing but my pets to keep me company out here. When I looked out my window into my front yard this morning, I saw, tucked slightly away from the road, braced up against one of the trees that line my driveway, a little booth. It's rickety looking and leaning slightly to one side like it was made by kids. And there's buckets of fat, red apples on either side, plus a couple more balanced on nearby chairs. On the front of the booth is a sign hand-painted in blotchy and dripping black paint. Apples for sale. There's something behind the tree. I can't see it, but I know it's there. Looking at the tree makes my eyes burn like I haven't blinked in days. There's something impossible to comprehend. Something other, something that doesn't belong. Or maybe we're the ones who don't belong. No one has walked by yet, but if you do, if you happen to see the booth, I'm begging you, don't take the apples. Story 9. Kmart Security. I have never told this story to anyone, but it's been so long now, I felt the need to get it off my chest. So this happened way back in 1991. I was 24 years old and had just gotten out of the Army after a 4-year stint. I was stationed in Fort Carson, and I loved Colorado Springs so much I decided to live there as civilian. Anyways, one of the first jobs I got was security guard at a Kmart, which was kind of odd, but this particular Kmart had a high theft rate. So they hired out a security guard during the summer. Overall, it was a pretty uneventful stint, except for one experience, which is why I'm writing this. So it was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was a dead day. Nothing had happened until a couple of teenage guys came into the store. They felt a little suspicious to me, so I kind of followed them around the store, keeping an eye on them from a distance. It wouldn't be long, though, when they proved my suspicion correct, and as I spied one of them sticking several CDs into the inner pocket of his jacket. Quickly, they started to make their way to the entrance, and so I double-timed it, catching them right before the doors, grabbing each one by the shoulder. Then the kid in the jacket screams, "Run," startling me for a second, which allowed the jacket kid to bolt through the front doors, but leaving his friend to retreat through the store. Figuring it would be easier to catch the kid in the store, I took pursuit of him. I was about 30 feet behind when I saw him push through the large door leading to the loading dock area. Through the door window, I see him running up a metal staircase to the second-floor office area. At this point, I knew I had him trapped since that staircase was the only entry/exit access to that floor. Running up the stairs, I see him down the hallway, and he sees me. Panicked, he enters a storage room to the right. Gotcha, I think. He's entered a room with no exit. Running to the door, I take a quick breath to gather myself in case I have to wrestle with this kid, and I open the door, bracing myself for him, but instead find nothing. The room was small, about 6 by 12 feet, and was full of bankers' boxes containing old paperwork. I stood there, shocked, until I saw a slight opening at the other end of the room. I assumed he jammed himself in this tight corner, so I walked to the opening ready to grab him, except again nothing. Now my mind was reeling. What the hell is happening? I thought. Spinning around 2 times, I tried to find the kid, but there was nothing. He had disappeared. Except that's impossible. Exiting the storage room back into the hallway, I carefully listened for any sounds of movement, but hear nothing. Then look at the end of the hallway. I see the other door. I know I saw him enter the storage room, but maybe my eyes played a trick on me. So I walk to the door and turn the knob. It's locked. My heart starts pounding. So he must have went in here and locked the door. My hands now shaking, I fumble with the keys until I unlock the door. Entering slowly, I expect to see him, but I don't. I examine every inch of the 2 offices, but find nothing. At this point, returning to the hallway, my head is throbbing from confusion I'm feeling. Suddenly looking up, I see the corrugated ceiling panels and think, that's where he is. He climbed into the ceiling. Stacking up some bankers' boxes, I climb on top of them and push aside one of the panels. Clicking on my flashlight, I slowly scan the entire area. There's no way he climbed up here. He would have easily fallen through the aluminum framing and thin ceiling panels. Sitting down on the boxes, the only question running through my mind is, what happened to him? For the next half hour, I scour every inch of the rooms again, but finally return to my small office. Looking at my desk, I see the CCTV monitor and immediately rewind it about 20 minutes. First, I examine the camera situated above the electronics department, and sure enough, I see the 2 teenagers enter into view and see the kid sneakily put the CDs into his jacket. Unfortunately, there is no camera on the 2nd floor, but then I notice the loading dock camera captures part of the staircase. Rewinding that one, I see the kid running up the stairs, and a moment later, I follow behind. From that moment, I watch carefully to see if he runs back down at some point. But no, nothing. The only person who comes back down is me. Using the security Polaroid camera, I took a couple of photos of those screens to validate I wasn't crazy. For the rest of the day, I would examine every corner of the store, hoping to find something, but didn't. I'd spent another couple months as security there, and there were a couple of times when I was on the 2nd floor, and I swear I'd hear what sounded like someone rummaging through boxes coming from the storage room. Yet each time I checked, the room was empty. The last strange event happened 6 days before I quit. I was walking around when I swear I heard a very low voice speaking over the music that played around the store. I stopped and listened intently, and what I heard was, "Help me! I'm stuck in here and I can't find my way out." A cold chill ran down my back, and seeing another employee, I asked him if they heard that voice. He looked at me sideways and said, "If you're hearing voices, maybe it's time to find another job." Which I did, but I'll never forget that kid. In fact, on my last day, I decided to hide a Polaroid camera in the ceiling of the storage room. I know that sounds weird, but I genuinely believe that kid was in there somewhere. Story 10. My boots are covered in mud. I don't know if I've gone insane. I keep telling myself I'm writing this for anyone who likes to wander into the cosmos of their own mind, like a warning, like a flare. Still, it could be me trying to pin the world to the page so it stops slipping. Backpacking has always been my anchor. When I was a kid and everything got too loud, I'd take off into the woods behind our place in Georgia, walk until cicadas turned into a single long sound, and the air went cool under the trees. I liked how the forest swallowed noise. I liked how light got filtered through pine needles and spider silk. The Appalachians feel different than other places. It's not quiet like a library. It's peaceful, like the mountain is pushing its thumb on the pulse of the land and slowing down life. Moving to Florida for work felt like getting relocated to a frying pan. Flat, hot, sticky. The air down here doesn't move. It sits and sweats. I can't see a horizon without a billboard stuck in it. But the mountains are only 8 hours away if you leave in the dark and drive like your brain depends on it. So I do. I still do. Those trips back up to Georgia feel like going home to a version of myself I don't have to explain. We planned this 2-day trip for the past month. Jake, Brandon, and I should say it now. My name is Hunter. Jake's been my friend since we were dumb kids getting scraped up on BMX bikes. 10 years of knowing exactly how he'll react before he does. He's serious, responsible, but in that quiet way that makes you forget he's always taking care of something. Brandon is a later addition. Jake's buddy from college, like a stray that started following us around and then refused to leave. Brandon's a guy who always has a story, and it's always half true, and the other half is the part that should have killed him. He recently dived into a hot tub at a party. He fractured 2 vertebrae, then stood up with his neck crooked, asking if anyone thought he needed a hospital. Somehow, he didn't die from a break, and even more impressively, he is ready to join us on a hike again, only a year later. He brags about stealing Aldi steaks like it makes him an outlaw. He's dumb lucky, and I never really liked him, but Jake did, so I put up with him constantly doing stupid shit. Last trip out, Brandon tossed a lighter into the fire as a joke, and it popped and burned neat constellations into my tent fly. I patched them with clear tape like band-aids on a sky. For this trip, I went overboard with a new bag, a new headlamp, a new tent, and the best food possible. 2 frozen steaks for the first night, wrapped in newspaper. A couple of astronaut ice creams that taste like powdered vanilla, but the nostalgia makes it worth it. I found a trail on Reddit that looked like a good one, with less traffic, better views, and steeper climbs than most routes. The thread had a poorly scanned topo map and a comment saying, "Worth it," which in backpacker language can cover anything from scenic to near death. I left on Friday before sunrise. Florida leaked away behind me in long, wet rectangles of light. By Valdosta, the air shifted. By Macon, the sky felt taller. Somewhere after Dahlonega, the hills heaved up into more than a slight hill that Florida calls a mountain, and my shoulders came down out of my ears. I called Jake outside commerce, and he answered like I dragged him out of a pit. "It's Friday," he croaked. "Shit, meet me at my house." Jake wasn't packed. Of course he wasn't. He had ramen and trail mix, and nothing like a tent. I tossed him my spare, because it's easier than scolding him. We hit the grocery for fuel, and then Jake called Bill, our usual guy. Mushrooms were the plan. Instead, Bill said, "I got something new." He held up a zip bag to the light. Little translucent black gummies with gold flecks suspended inside, like someone ground up a wedding ring and poured the glitter into Jell-O. He called them stoppers. Said they froze time, but not in a DMT leave your body way. You're still in the world, Bill said. Just the world gets slow. Sticky, like the second refuses to change. $20 a pop, twice the usual. Jake didn't blink. My stomach did. Psychedelics in the backcountry are a dice roll on a good day. Time dilation sounded like a dice roll with knives glued on, but I couldn't stop staring at those gummies. The gold didn't look like edible glitter. It looked like metal filings caught in a jellyfish. I said yes before I finished the thought. We swung by Brandon's. Like always, chaos. His parents were in the house yelling. Their voices hitting that too familiar pitch old arguments have. The one that sounds like a fly trap between window and screen. Brandon was on the porch drinking from a tall can, laughing at nothing. He had his pack, though, credit where it's due, when we told him about the stoppers. He grinned like a kid and asked if he could take 2. "No," I said, and slapped his hand when he pantomimed snatching the bag. "1 each. We've only got enough for one a night apiece." He smiled like he agreed, and his eyes said, "I'll do what I want." Up 19 to side roads. The Corolla is complaining like Grandpa about every pothole. We stopped at a crusty gas station because the tank light popped on. For pumps, 2 dead, a buzzing fluorescent light, and a top sign with a P in Pine View burnout. So it read, _interview. Two guys out front by the ice machine in those puffy jackets that always look damp and never look warm. One watched us while we pumped. He had that too thin face and jittery jaw. He eased over when he saw the packs and asked, "You boys go up Asher Mountain?" We nodded. He shook his head like we'd told him we were swimming across an interstate. "Don't camp up there. Not at night. Nothing good in those woods." Brandon snapped without missing a beat. "We don't have shit for you. Get the fuck out of here." The guy's mouth twitched. He spat near our boots and shuffled off, muttering. I told myself it was just the usual mountain lore. Appalachia collects stories like birds collect pant legs. Every ridge has a thing. Every hollow has a dead man's name. I've hiked enough. I've never seen anything but bear scat and people's trash. The road into the trailhead turned to red clay and ruts. Rain earlier had slicked it to a pace that grabbed the tires and tried to kiss us into the ditch. Trees pressed close. Pines and crooked oak. Trunks dark with wet. Beads of water trembling on leaves like hell breath. The Corolla did that sideways slide a couple of times, where your heart falls to your feet and then the tires grip and catch, and you pretend you didn't almost die? Trailhead. A tilted wooden post, a bullet pock sign. A pull-off with enough room for 3 cars if everyone likes each other. Gray light under the canopy. The kind of light where a camera would turn the world to fuzz. We lit a joint and passed it. The smoke cut with that wet leaf smell that always smells like rotten home at the same time. Packs up. Hip belts buckled. Click, click. That little happy clatter of metal on metal. That means you're about to disappear for a while. I hadn't hiked this path before. The Reddit map said easy first half. But either they were lying or the forest decided to express itself. It was narrow, overgrown, a buckthorn slapping trail. Little wet branches whipped our arms and laid cold lines of water across our sleeves. The ground was all roots and hidden holes. The climb hit quick, a steep switchback that woke the lungs like a slap. We fell into usual pace while going up the steep inclines of the Appalachians. Past the joint cough, laugh, and past the joint. No one is willing to stop smoking and admit that their lungs are on fire from the climb. I can't complain though. There isn't anything better than the smell of smoke and pine sap. It was getting slippery, though, and the dirt tasted like iron when it sprayed up in your mouth after a slip. Brandon dropped half the weed in a puddle and swore like we'd pushed him. That was the good stuff, dude. You didn't buy it, I said, but I was smiling because I was still soft enough to smile. The fog rolled through in bands like ghost rivers. Sometimes it came up from a valley and slid through the trunks at knee height. Sometimes it hung in ragged sheets between trees, and you had to walk into it like a curtain into another room. When the wind pushed it, it went sideways, and the whole forest blurred like it needed to be wiped with thumb. By late afternoon, we climbed onto a ridge with a low rock outcrop. The view unfurled. Green layers of mountains, ridges stacked like old blankets, each one taller than the one in front of it. A vulture circled a lazy loop that made me jealous. I set up the little stove on the flat rock and thawed the steaks. The paper peeled off damp and left newsprint on the meat, which cooked away, and we pretended it made us smarter. Grease dripped, hissed, smelled like 5 stars. We ate steak and ramen and laughed at how good everything tastes when the air is cold and you work for it. Then the sky started bleeding purple, and the trees went black before the ground did. That's when I pulled the zip bag out. The stoppers shimmered in the firelight. The gold flecks woke up and the flames moved, pulsing like they were reacting. 1 each, I said. I meant it like a command. Brandon gave me his wide smile, like yes, sir, and still tried to sneak an extra one before my hand hit his head. Ouch, what the fuck, dude? I was joking, he shouted at me. I said 1 each, stop being an asshat. He dropped it after that and took his 1. The gummy hit my tongue and my stomach dropped. Gasoline and pennies. There was a chemical top note like paint thinner and a rotten sweet underneath like cough, syrup you left in a hot car. It stuck to my teeth and I had to scrape it off with my tongue. Brandon made a face. Jake rolled his eyes and said, "That can't be good," but chewed and swallowed and then raised his eyebrows like, "Well, we're committed." At first, it was just a campfire. Pop hiss sparked, the usual comfort. Jake told a story about a guy at work who printed 30 copies of his resignation letter and then forgot to resign. Brandon bragged about a girl who didn't exist. I let the noise move around me and watched the smoke. It went up. It did what smoke does. Then it didn't. The smoke folded. It bent like a ribbon being tucked into a pocket. It rolled back down into flame like the fire had become a drain. The sparks didn't float up and outward. They shot sideways, a little golden school of fish that darted and grouped and then stayed in a knot like they were stuck in glue. I felt the first hair raise on my arms. I blinked, and the fire was like TV static. The gray fuzz of a screen an old set makes when you kill the channel, and it hums that low, electric hum you can feel in your fillings. The static ate the shape of the logs and gave back a rectangle of gray noise that looked like heat shimmering on the road, but colder. Jake had a line of drool shining on his chin and didn't know it. Brandon's mouth fell open and stayed. His eyes were wet, reflecting the static like tiny screams. Does a fire look like that to you? I asked, and my voice sounded like I was under a blanket. Brandon said, the fire's fine, man. It's the trees. We looked. I swear to you, the forest had straightened. The randomness you expect from the different gaps, the weird spacing, and the drunk angles were gone. The trees stood in columns and rows, lined up like pews in a cathedral, trunks in perfect alignment front to back. The gaps between them were identical, cut to measure. In the distance, rocks aligned too, each the same size, spaced like someone used a football field as a ruler and stamped them across the ridge. Rock, air, air. My eyes tried to slide off it, and instead stuck to the pattern like burrs to socks. Then I heard water. It started like a faucet being turned on. In another room, a trickle that tickled the ear. It became a stream, then a rush, then full-on waterfall noise planted just out of sight, the kind of sound you feel in your chest and your teeth. It was so obvious, so loud that I said, "We need water anyway." Like that was a reason to stand up. We stood up. We left the fire. The rows of trees made walking in a straight line feel like walking down an aisle at the world's worst grocery store. Every time I thought we'd hit a bend in the trail. The bend slid one aisle over, same distance away. When I looked back behind us, the camp was gone. I saw aisle after aisle of trunks, each gap the same. Our firelight was already a lie my brain had told me. The other didn't seem to care, so I just kept walking with them. We walked toward the roar until it filled the world, and then, as if somebody flipped a switch, silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring their own private sound because the brain refuses to accept anything. No crickets, no owls, not even wind. Just our boots pressing wet leaves and coming up with that sticky kiss sound. That's when I realized it was still dusk. It had been dusk when we lit the fire. It was dusk when we stood up. It was dusk right now, even though it felt like half an hour had slid by while the waterfall's sound grew and died. The sky had stalled at that bruised color with no stars yet, and no sun either, like a clock with its second hand glued down. I cursed for not bringing my headlamp. It was in my pack. I could have grabbed it. I didn't. That stupid little decision started to feel like the hinge the night swung on. Brandon licked his lips. They looked pale in the half-light, like someone had pulled the red out of him. "Do you guys still hear the water?" "No," I said, and my voice came out then. "It's gone." We turned around to walk back, and the forest still hadn't changed. The rose stayed. The rock stayed. The smell of our fire, meat, and smoke was gone. Our prints didn't show up. It was like we'd been walking on a new floor that rolled over the old one as we moved, covering tracks. "Well, fuck, now we have to find our way back," I said as we started to move back. That's when I began to feel like something else was walking with us. At first, it was footsteps that didn't match ours. Softer. The sound of small stones clicking against each other just to the side, like something with narrow feet, was testing the ground. Then 2 of those. Then 3. Every time we stopped, the extras stopped. Every time we moved, they resumed. Not in sync. Not echoes. Followers. I didn't say it. Jake didn't say it. We tightened up without saying it, shoulders in, breath shallow. Brandon kept glancing to the side with his eyes only, his head locked forward like prey animals keep it when they listen for predators. Then the forest started to talk. An owl called, not far, not a deep night voice. A high one, except it didn't hoot. It said my name. It pulled apart into syllables like someone reading hue and tear off a sheet of paper for first time. The last are ticked to my ear in a long, dragged-out horror. We froze. Jake's eyes cut to me. Brandon laughed without breath. You guys heard that, right? Tell me I'm not crazy. It's just a drug, Jake said, but his jaw was locked. A coyote yipped, except it wasn't. It was Brandon's laugh. The exact laugh he'd made 2 hours ago when he told us the steak story. But it wasn't beside me. It was behind, somewhere down an aisle of trees. It sounded doubled, like it bounced around a long tube and came back as an echo, only the tube wasn't there. The hair on my neck turned to needles. Brandon's smile fell off. That was me, he said. Not a question. We walked. What else do you do? The silence between the noises was worse. My brain put a faint TV hum in there to cover it, because it needed something. And then the woods did my mother's voice. Clear as day. The exact tone she used when I was 12 and out after dark. Hunter, time to come inside. From about 2 aisles over. I froze in place, but the others didn't seem to hear it. They stopped and Jake asked, "What's wrong?" I quickly snapped out of it and continued, "Oh, nothing, let's keep walking." I didn't want to repeat what I heard, which felt like something I didn't want outside my mind. We passed the same stump 3 times. I know it was the same, because a thick branch came out at the same angle and broke off at the same place, and the moss on the north side did a weird hook shape that looked like a question mark. 3 times, 10 minutes apart, we passed a fallen log with a split that looked like a grin. Twice, the trail didn't turn back on itself. I swear to you it didn't. It reused itself. I pulled my compass. The needle went slowly. It started to point and then kept going, like syrup sliding around a plate. It did a full circle, tired, then another. We didn't have north anymore. I checked my phone. 40% battery, then 62, then 19. The clock read 7:12, then 7:13, then 7:12 again. I wanted to throw the thing into the trees because it was pretending to be a clock and wasn't. We stopped to drink water we didn't need. I looked at Jake, and something in my brain stepped back 1 inch. His eyes looked wrong. Pupils wide, sure, but there was a ring around the iris that looked like the ring on a coffee mug. His mouth hung a little more open than a resting mouth should. His shadow behind him stretched longer than mine by a lot, even though we were next to each other. I blinked, and he was him again, but the after image sat there like the halo you see after staring at the sun. Brandon stared at him, and his hand flexed like it forgot if it was supposed to be a fist. "Why is your face doing that?" he asked. Jake sighed. "What are you talking about?" "Your eyes," Brandon said. "They're not yours." We laughed. We always laugh, because what else do you do when tripping balls? The granola bar thing happened next. I pulled one from my hip pocket, unwrapped it, ate half, and shoved the other half back in. I remember the taste of peanut and stale honey, and the way it scratches your throat. 20 minutes later, I reached for it again to finish it, and the bar was sealed. New wrapper, no tear, no crumbs in the pocket. I held it up and played with the seam, like maybe I had messed up, and then my stomach turned, and I shoved it back like I hadn't seen it. Brandon's eyes wouldn't leave me. He kept stepping so he could see my face from a new angle without being obvious. He did the same to Jake. He spun, walking backwards for a while, never turned his back to both of us at the same time. The footsteps that weren't ours adjusted with us, trying to keep up, and that was the first time I really wanted to yell. That need hit my throat and died there. "You're not Hunter," Brandon said. Quiet, like to himself. I managed to laugh. "What the hell are you talking about?" "Your voice," he said. "It's not yours. It's wrong." He looked at Jake. "And your eyes keep freaking out. You think I'm stupid? You're not." He swallowed like his mouth had dried out. "You're not you." Brandon breathed. Jake said, calm voice, the one he uses when I start spiraling. "It's the drug. The drug's not making the forest straight." Brandon said, and he gestured out at all the aisles. The drug's not making the rocks line up like someone measured space with a ruler, and he choked on the next word. I heard you behind me. Hunter, I heard you, laughing. We're all hearing weird things, Brandon. It's just a drug, I said in a reassuring voice. Brandon seemed to calm down slightly, and we stumbled upon what looked like the clearing we had set up camp at. A wider patch in the aisles with a rows open a fraction. A dead stump in the center, like a table. Our fire wasn't there. Nothing from us was there. But the ground looks the same everywhere when it's covered in oak leaves stamped flat and damp, and we wanted out of the aisles, so we stopped. Jake crouched. The old man crouched, he does when he's thinking. Brandon kept to the edge with his back to the trees, and pulled his pocket knife out, flipping it over and over in his hand. I could smell iron, which might have been from my cut across the knuckle from a branch, or it might have been in the air. The sky refused to change. Dusk held. What time is it? I said, and it wasn't really a question. 7:12, Jake said. It was 7:12 before, Brandon said. It was 7:12 an hour ago. We haven't been here an hour, I said. My mouth lied. My body said we'd been walking a lifetime. The clearing had sounds again, not real ones. It was like someone put in a soundtrack and played it too quietly. Little clicks that wanted to be twigs snapping but didn't commit. A hiss that wanted to be wind but didn't know how to move leaves. Mimic sounds. You could tell by the way the hair on the back of your neck didn't know if it should stand up or lie down. Sit, Jake said. We're gonna ground and ride it out. Brandon laughed, low at first and then high like a kettle. Ground? With you? With it. He pointed the knife. The point wobbled because his hand was shaking. You think I don't see it? See what? I said, and the static hum climbed my jaw into the hinge of my ear. You, he said, and his voice split into two versions that almost matched. You're wearing him, like a suit, like a deer skull on a man. You think I'm... He breathed hard. You don't even move right. I didn't realize I had my hands up until I saw them. Palms open, fingers soft. The universal we're okay gesture you give to a skittish dog. Brandon, I said, it's me. It's Hunter. We ate steak and ramen. You spilled the weed and cried about it. His eyes flicked fast like a hummingbird. That's easy to say. Jake stood slowly. Brandon put the knife down. You say my name like that again and I'll cut it out of your mouth, Brandon said. He stepped right, just a hair, so we were no longer in line. He wanted us separated. He wanted our faces in frame one at a time, so he could be sure. You think I don't hear you two whisper when I look away? You think I didn't see your shadows stretch wrong? Your teeth look longer when you talk. Okay, Jake said. We're gonna breathe. And Brandon moved. It wasn't clean. It wasn't a movie scene where the bad guy attacks you. He lunged like he forgot how to run, and remembered at the last second. The knife came at Jake, low, clumsy, fast. Jake got an arm up and caught the blade across his forearm. A flash of red, a mouth opening in skin. I yelled and grabbed Brandon's wrist and felt the tendons under my palm jumping. He was strong. He twisted like his bones were greased. The knife skated. Jake shoved him shoulder to chest, and Brandon laughed. That double laugh. Two voices almost on top of each other, so it sounded like a chorus with one guy at a time. We hit the ground in a knot. Leaves in my mouth. Dirt in my mouth. That iron taste again. The knife came down toward my face, and I shoved the flat out with my thumb, and it sliced the pad, and I saw white under the red for a second, and then my hand was hit out of view from Jake tackling Brandon. They rolled. They hit the stump. Brandon swung the knife and caught Jake shallow across the ribs, and the sound Jake made was like a dog being kicked, and my chest locked, and something inside me said rock. There was a rock at my knee, flat hand-sized and wet. I picked it up. It felt heavy in a way rocks are heavy, but also in a way rocks aren't. I didn't think. I didn't reason. I ran to where Brandon and Jake were still on the ground and swung. It caught Brandon across the side of his head, and he went off, his eyes trying to focus on me and not getting there. The knife wobbled. Jake kicked it, and it skipped into the leaves, and I saw the gleam once and then not again. Brandon tried to stand and couldn't. He laughed again, except this time it wasn't two voices. It was three. His mouth didn't match any of them. "Stop," I said. "Stop, stop, stop, stop." He came again, one arm hanging, one arm clawed, and there was no more talking. Jake hit him shoulder first, and they went down together. I brought the rock down again and again, because my brain had become a single command that said make him stop and didn't have room for anything else. There are noises you make when you lift weights. Those came out of me. Then there are noises something makes when it breaks. I won't write those. We stopped when we were both too tired to lift our arms, and the hum in the air faded, and my hands shook like I was going into hypothermia. Brandon lay back, looking at the canopy. His eyes didn't blink. His chest didn't move. The rows of trees behind him lined up like a barcode that went on forever. Jake's breath came in tears, little shreds. He pressed his hand to his arm, and it came away slick, and he looked at me like he was 6 and I could fix it. "We have to," I said, and didn't have anything after that. We turned away for a second. Maybe we both did. Maybe only I did. We turned away because the blood looked like a map I didn't want to read. When we turned back, Brandon's body was gone. We didn't decide to run. We just ran. The aisles blurred. The straight rows made a flicker book of trunks on either side. Every 4 steps I looked back and saw nothing and saw everything. Depending on how my lungs moved, the footsteps multiplied. The voices got smart. They learned our tones and gave them back wrong. "Hunter," said Jake's twisted voice, from the trees to my right, casual like a friend at a party who wants to tell you a joke. Jake said something that sounded like me from the left, soft, almost a question. The owl repeated my name and added please. I tripped and ate dirt, and a piece of a stick went into my palm and came out slick, and my hand didn't feel like a hand. Jake hauled me up by the back of my shirt, and we kept going. The rows repeated. We passed a stump with the question mark moss. We passed a log with the grin split. We passed a rock I'd used, or one that looked exactly like it, lying clean in the leaves. I don't know how long we ran. I looked at my phone and saw 7:13. Then I saw 7:12. This shit is never going to end, I thought to myself, and kept running. At some point, I fell and didn't get up. The world narrowed to the size of 2 leaves, and the thread between them. The hum in my teeth got louder until it was the only thing. Everything got dark like the dimmer turned down, not like a switch. The last thing I remember is my own voice calling from the trees. Not Jake, not Brandon. Me, the exact way I sound when I'm tired, and trying to sound like I'm not. "Hunter, this way, hurry." And I went. I didn't choose it. My body chose it. I tried to fight, and the world slid, and then it was gone. I woke up in my bed. I tried to yell, but I had no air. All I could hear is my phone alarm doing the little chime I hate. Blind light striped across the wall. Floor to light, flat and colorless. I stared at the ceiling, and it was my ceiling. I lay there and waited for Jake to lean over me and grab me, but nothing happened. I let my breath escape me in a laugh, letting my body push the panic out of me. It was all just some sort of twisted dream my brain made up. I turned over and turned off my alarm. The phone said Friday, the day we were supposed to leave. It took me a minute to stand. My knees were stiff in that post height, way like I'd been walking all weekend. My hip flexors did that little click thing. I told myself it was because I slept wrong. My palms ached. My left one burned when I curled it. There was a little tacky spot, like a scab line. I told myself I scratched it on something here at home, in the most normal place in the world. The calendar on the wall in my room said we were leaving today. The printout with the route and mile markers hung by a magnet on the fridge next to a shopping list that said eggs, toilet paper, and steak. I went to the bathroom sink and turned on the tap. The water that came out sounded like a waterfall, a football field away. It filled the sink, and as I watched, it looked like TV static for half a second, and then water again, normal, clean water. I looked at myself in the mirror. My pupils were a little wide, as if a room had dimmed. My mouth hung open just a little, because I forgot to finish closing it. I stared at my eyes and waited for a ring to move across them like coffee in a mug, and it didn't. I laughed again, softly, and this time it sounded like someone else. And then it sounded like me again. I could go outside. I could get in the Corolla and drive north. I could knock on Jake's door and he would open it and be Jake and I would be Hunter. We would laugh and he would ask if I was ready to go. I would say sure, and then my brain would fall through a trapdoor. We would be standing on a ridge, eating steak, and watching a fire's smoke go up like it should instead of down. But when I went to the door to check the weather, I noticed my boots. They were my hiking boots in their usual spot that I always leave them, but they were wrong. When I knelt down to look at them, I noticed there were tracks in the door that I hadn't cleaned up. Mud tracks, and there was mud on my boots. It was red Appalachian clay.